and welcome to today's webinar. It's a very important call for us regarding the protection of the transit benefit. We have over 150 folks who've registered for today's event. Looks like we've got about 100 on the call so far, so we'll hopefully have some additional ones join us as we go. There are a number of non-members on non-ACT members on today's call, and just wanted to take a quick opportunity to introduce you to ACT. The Association for Commuter Transportation is an international association leading advocate for commuter transportation and transportation demand management programs and professionals. We strive to get the most out of our transportation system while improving the lives of commuters, increasing livability of communities, and supporting the economic growth of businesses as we look to create a better journey for everyone. If you are already a member of ACT, you know of the valuable benefits and services you receive from the organization: networking, learning, advocacy, public policy, and research. If not, I encourage you to learn more about us and invite you to join the association and possibly attend one of our upcoming events this summer at the International Conference in New Orleans, or in the fall at our TDM Forum. The transit benefit is an issue that has been very important to ACT over the years, as we've been the chief advocate and supporter for parity and continued advocacy for support. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Pavlichuk, ACT's Government Affairs Director.
Thanks a lot, David. Just to go through real quickly here in terms of an agenda, I want to talk a few minutes about the status of tax reform and then really focus on ways you can help. I hope to take only about 30 minutes. I know everyone's time is precious. Let me also note a few logistical items here. On the panel, you will see 5 handouts. These handouts include a primer that ACT has put together that sort of discusses in breadth the transit benefit for those who may be unfamiliar with it. We also have a draft copy of the employer letter that I'll discuss, a copy of the legislative alert that hopefully you have received a number of times, as well as the executive summary and final report done by APTA, looking at the benefits of the transit benefit to transit agencies and the threat of what it means to transit agencies if they were to lose the transit benefit. ACT participated in the development of that white paper, and we're very grateful for APTA to have helped put that together. Let me sort of begin real quickly on a very, very brief background for anyone who's completely unfamiliar. I will not spend much time on this. If you want more information, please contact me separately. On the transit benefit, Section 132F of the Internal Revenue Code creates this wonderful thing called the Transportation Fringe Benefit. The roots of this of the transit portion began in the Clean Air Act in the early 90s, but where a lot of this really began is the determination during the Reagan administration that employer-provided parking was in fact a fringe benefit that could and should be taxed. Instead of taxing parking, Congress determined in the 1980s, as a part of the 1986 tax reform process, that parking would be excludable from taxes up to a certain amount of money, and that the fringe benefit would be provided on a pre-tax basis. I mention that because the fate of the transit benefit in many ways can and should be tied to the parking benefit. The parking benefit, or the transit benefit itself, was increased in the Clean Air Act in the early 90s. Eventually, it grew to $100 in 1999, and full parity was established last year in 2016. So we're now in 2017, the cap for parking and transit are both $255 a month. Just a couple of things about the transit benefit. It can be provided as a subsidy or as a tax-favored treatment for certain commuting-related expenses that also include van pooling. We call that pre-tax. It must be sponsored by an employer. It cannot be a situation where On April 15th, an individual decides to go to the computer and write off their transit expenses. And monthly benefit, it's a monthly benefit taken out of the paycheck every month and signified most pay stubs, not all but most, and enrollment can incur at any time. I should also note there is a bicycle benefit. There are many differences between the bicycle and the other benefits. The bicycle benefit, there's a $20 a month cap. It can only be provided as a subsidy, and the bicycle benefit cannot be combined with the parking or the transit benefit. That is something that ACT is working to fix, but we will discuss that at another point. Let me talk a little bit about sort of the Community Benefit Works For Us coalition that ACT has helped lead. It involves a number of associations and organizations, including Eden Red, WageWorks, Enterprise, APTA, as well as a number of other associations. In the parity battle, we undertook a grassroots effort, and more than 150,000 letters were sent to Congress urging them to create parity. We also organized a number of letters of support from national and regional organizations, and really had a quite lengthy battle and discussion with House Republicans and Congress in general, and we were finally rewarded after, in many ways, I started working on this when I was a young, skinny lad in 2000, and we finally were able to achieve full and permanent parity in 2016. That being said, tax reform creates danger for us losing everything we've gained. Let me talk a little bit about tax reform from a very, very holistic level. It is the goal of this Congress, and in many ways Republicans in this Congress, to simplify the tax code and reduce everyone's rates, including corporate tax rates. Right now, the tax code is literally tens of thousands of pages, and there's a number of provisions. Sometimes they're called loopholes. Sometimes they're called tax expenditures. Sometimes they're called write-offs. There's a lot of different ways to describe tax policy. Make no mistake about it, the transportation fringe benefit, both parking and transit, are a tax policy. They are a tax expenditure. So when you hear those things and you hear about, a fairer, flatter, gas or tax system and all those things, keep in mind that what they're really saying is we want to eliminate all of these exceptions. Last year, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, released a blueprint for a fair, flatter tax code, and that really looked at eliminating most, if not all, tax expenditures and greatly reducing corporate tax rates as well as individual tax rates. Without getting into much discussion about the politics of it and the policy of it, when you have a lower tax rate but have fewer write-offs, the individual really doesn't benefit too much from it. But there are situations where it is, and quite frankly, it would be much simpler. That being said, again, all of these things that we talk about, the transportation fringe benefit, state and local tax write-off, home mortgage deductions, those things all go away. Last week, the Trump administration released a one-page proposal that was very, very light on details, and to be very upfront, and this is not in no way meant to be a political statement, but the statements coming from the Trump administration are in many ways tough to follow in terms of what their actual policy proposal is, because the one-pager said not a whole lot, but statements coming from the administration in many ways are often contradictory in terms of what they're actually proposing. So that's not meant to be a political statement, it's meant to be a statement of what's occurring. And I say that because the Trump administration released a tax reform proposal that really looked a lot more like just simply a dramatic tax cut for employers. And why that's important is one of the things that House Republicans and Senate Republicans are looking to do in tax reform in many ways is create a reformed tax bill or tax process in this country without increasing national debt. They actually want to reduce national debt, and basically what the Trump administration proposes in many ways can be viewed as dramatically decreasing the amount of money we're taking in, thus increasing the deficit quite significantly. There is some discussion on whether or not those tax cuts would then evoke additional economic activity, which would then create more tax revenue. It's not for me to say whether or not that's accurate or not, but what I can say is that the Trump proposal in many ways in Congress is being viewed as a really large tax cut, which gets sort of to the status of tax reform. After the health care debacle, again, not a statement, I think they would qualify it as such. In many ways, congressional Republicans are looking for a victory. So a lot of discussions are taking place right now about the scope, size, and the process of tax reform. Again, the blueprint that Chairman Brady put out was a very, very elaborate reformational process that is really a once-in-a-generation type proposal. But in many ways, the analogy that I use is that Congress tried to walk up a hill and failed, so now they're going to try to climb a mountain. Healthcare is much simpler in many ways than tax reform will be. So I think a lot of the discussion is taking place is whether or not they can get agreement on if the scope should be incredibly large, what the size it should be, and then what the foundation of the tax reform proposal should be. All of those things are in discussion. As a part of those discussions are also a lot of the details. If we are eliminating tax expenditures, should we eliminate all of them? Should we be selective? Should we only eliminate those that are in many ways the loopholiest of loopholiest? Things of that nature. So those are discussions that are taking place as we speak. In fact, there was a retreat, they're calling it, that occurred over the weekend with members of Congress and the Ways and Means Committee about tax reform, and I'm waiting to hear back in terms of to what level of detail. That being said, all of those hurdles and all of that in place, House leadership and the White House are still committed to trying to move a tax reform package this spring and this summer, and all engines are still going forward. So that brings us to where we're at in terms of the transit benefit. There is a very, very real possibility that if an elaborate or an extensive tax reform proposal moves forward, that it will include the elimination of most, if not all, tax expenditures. I do believe that they will have to keep some of the most popular tax breaks, tax expenditures in it. What we are lobbying, what we are advocating for right now is to make sure that the transportation fringe benefit is one of them. I want to pause for a second and sort of talk a little bit about why I keep on mentioning the transportation fringe benefit as a whole. There's a lot of discussion, and rightfully so, about the best transportation policy would be to eliminate the parking benefit. And while I concur and agree with that completely, I do not see a situation where this Congress, and in reality, many Congresses, would eliminate just the parking benefit. And here's why. You create accounting in the tax structure whereby any parking provided by an employer, whether it's a leased parking spot in Washington, D.C., or a piece of dirt road behind Tom's Nail Shop in Wilsonville, Oklahoma, that parking would then have to be evaluated, and then the employee would have to be taxed on the value of that parking, and the employer would have to pay payroll taxes on that parking. I cannot see this Congress allowing a tax reform proposal to go through that would allow or require that to happen of all employers. What I'm fearful of in just advocating for a transit benefit only situation is that we lose and we are left just with a parking benefit. So if you were to wake up tomorrow and tell me that Congress decided we're going to eliminate the parking benefit, we're going to tax parking, but the transit benefit stays, I'd be all for it. But that is a 1 in 10,000 chance right now. So while I'm not in love with the idea, in many ways we are tying our fate in terms of the transit benefit to the parking benefit. Let me say this another way as well. I have spoken with a number of TMAs and a number of organizations where cities and whatnot, transit benefit utilization is not what it is in a Northern Virginia or a King County, Washington, or a Houston, Texas, where there's only a few people who use a transit benefit. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be involved or they shouldn't be involved in this effort. I will say two things. One, I think this provides an opportunity for you as someone who has an interest in this to then go to those employers or that TMA or wherever it may be and remind them and let them know about this benefit, and that this is an opportunity for them to save taxes. I did an analysis for somebody yesterday that even if an employer of 5,000 in suburban fill-in-the-blank state had 25 people use the transit benefit at $100 a month, they would save several $1,000s in payroll taxes. I don't think there's an employer in the country that wouldn't want to save some money while at the same time adding benefits to what their employee offers. So I think, one, this provides an opportunity in many areas to sort of address these issues with employers. Secondly, I don't think there's an employer in the country that wants to go through the accounting exercise of evaluating every parking spot on their property and then taxing their employees and themselves. So that's sort of a statement on that. Let me talk a little bit about what our efforts are, what we're doing, and what we need your help. There are two primary efforts going on. First and foremost are employers. In the past, the ACT, the Community Benefits Work For Us Coalition, and others have gone out towards local and regional advocacy organizations and asked them to sign on to the letter. And we've done that in spades. We've had hundreds of organizations sign on to letters. And while they are effective and useful, in tax reform, the voice that is carrying the loudest are employers. So we are asking any and all employer who provides this benefit, who provides parking in any way, shape, or form, who has an interest in transportation, to join a letter that I will pull up right now, and simply have their company listed on this letter. So this is a draft letter. There will be a number of tweaks to it, minor tweaks, nothing major. We are asking, if you are an employer, we are hoping, and on this line, I'm hoping that you will take a copy of this letter, which again can be found on the handout section, and that you will forward this to whatever approval process that needs to go to, that you will email me within the next week or so, that your company can be listed. I don't need signatures. I don't need anything other than simply authorization from you or from anyone who has the authority to give me that authorization to simply list the name of your company in the heading. We are targeting large major employers. I'm starting with the Fortune 500, and then I'm going to regional entities. Our targets for this letter in many ways, not in many ways, are these 24 Republicans. For right now, this moment in time, for the next several months, the only 24 members of Congress that really matter to me on this issue are the 24 you see on your screen. They are the Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee. They are the ones who are going to be huddling over the next several months. So if you represent states, districts, if you have offices in these states and districts, please reach out to me and let me know that you were willing to help, because these are the people that we are talking to, and the more companies that I can get from these districts, the better. Over the coming weeks and days, I'll be also doing some very targeted outreach myself to companies that are in these members of Congress's district. But I'm hoping through this blast alert that we can get a number of companies who represent or in these areas or national onto the letter. Which brings me sort of to my next point. Many of you on the line here are TMAs or your public agencies. What I'm hoping you'll be willing to do is reach out to those employers, reach out to those networks that you have. It doesn't matter what type of network it is, but reach out to those entities and help us find employers, help us reach out to those employers and get them in contact with us, make sure they get a copy of that letter. So, any way you have, whether it's a working group that you have, if you're a TMA, please work directly with your employers to get them this letter. Any way you have, get that to them and then have them contact me directly, or if they approve, just have them email me. I will say this, many of the conversations that I have had to date, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, getting an employer or a major corporation, or any corporation for that matter, to sign off on a letter is not as easy as simply, yep, I'm okay with it, let's go. There are often many different types of checks and balances and hurdles. It's a government affairs sign off, it's a communications sign off, it's all that. Oftentimes the people that eventually make the decision on whether or not to join these letters are not transportation experts in any way, shape, or form. That being said, I am a resource to you and those employers. So if there is a corporation or a company that is interested in signing on and wants more information and wants to have a 15-minute conversation, I have literally freed myself, my calendar as best I can for the next 2 weeks to make myself available to have those conversations. If I can't, I will have a surrogate, whether it's David Judd, who will speak in a little bit, John Martz, who's with Enterprise, who's been involved in the transit benefit for a long time, Jody Dietl with WageWorks, David Strauss, our executive director. If not me, somebody else who's been involved in this fight for a long time will be more than happy to spend 15 minutes not selling their goods, but talking to you about what we need and going through some of the details that someone will need. So please, please, please keep that in mind. That is, let me go back to the letter here. Again, as I go through here, you see sort of the high points that we're making, that in many ways this increases taxes, it'll create congestion, the government can save money, by how much it needs to build. There's a lot of complexities to this that we talk about, and these are obviously things that hit home for employers. A copy of this letter, again, can be found over there. Let me move on to the second thing that we are looking to do here. Secondly, we have, and Casey, if you want to begin to share your screen, we have an online grassroots effort. This is something that we did last year during Parity. It is a portal that allows individuals to take action, and Casey's going to demonstrate just how simple it is. And that this link is included in all the legislative alerts that have been sent around. So Casey here is going to enter in her zip code. We're all going to find out where Casey lives. And it sees here because of her zip code, there are several members of Congress that could represent that. So she's going to go ahead and enter in her, we are going to see her address. I ask that nobody stalk her.
I'm gonna put in the Act one, don't worry.
Okay. Casey's very intelligent. She sees there's 150 people on here and doesn't want any stalkers. That's the right move. I think she's mostly concerned about me, but that's neither here nor there.
No, I don't know why I pulled up yours.
Is that the right zip code, Casey?
Yeah.
Okay. So then it says here, this is the letter that will be sent. and it's in many ways the letter that is very similar to the employer letter. She will press send message. And there we have it. She has sent to her member of Congress a letter urging them to maintain the transit benefit. So that's 3 down, 147,997 to go. Again, it's our goal to reach 150,000 letters again. As of this morning, we were at 800. So we clearly have a lot of work to do. That, in many ways, if I can go ahead and take the screen back, Casey. And what you have there, that is the Commuter Benefits Work for Us website. That is the website of the, of the coalition that includes a lot of the data that we're talking about today. And once you fill out the website, you get directed to that website. What we're hoping you will do is, in addition to help getting employers, that you will click, you'll add the link that I reference here to the campaign, that you will include it in your newsletters, in communications, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Google Talks, TED Talks, whatever it is that you do. It is our hope that you will help spread the word to your employees, to the general public, to your friends, to whomever it is, to help spread the word. And that is really an all call. There's a lot of different types of organizations on the phone here, so obviously I'm not going to go through all of the different ways. But I'm very, very hopeful that regardless of who you are, you will take a half an hour today and do 2 things. 1, reach out to any employer or employer groups that you have and make them aware of this letter and actively urge them to reach out to me. Not just as an email blast, but actively, hey, Dave with Acme Corporation, this is important. You got 5 minutes to talk to Jason Pavlichuk about this, or 5 minutes to talk to me. In this case, I'm being you. Also, we hope that you spend 5-10 minutes to include I'm calling it the petition, but the grassroots campaign in any and all communications, and that you will create your own localized sort of legislative alert to your members. For those of you who receive federal money, I'm not going to tell you sort of how to do your job, but this is not advocacy in any direct way. If you write it the right way, and by that I think if you simply make people aware of the existence of this campaign, you are not lobbying at that point. You are simply noticing that this campaign is out there. If you are not a local agency, don't worry about what I just said. But for those of you that are, I think there are ways around notifying people of the existence of this grassroots campaign. Again, finally, I think the third thing is spread the word. The last thing that I will say is our deadline for employers is a soft one. We're trying to get as many employers as possible onto the letter by next week. That being said, again, it's a soft deadline. I'm well aware of how long it takes sometimes for these letters to get sign-off from employers. And because the tax reform debate is so liquid right now, it's really like Jell-O. It's not even liquid. There really isn't a hard deadline other than the sooner the better. So for our purposes right now, I'm going to say May 9th. But if May 11th comes along, don't feel like, oh, well, the deadline's already passed. Believe me, we're going to be continuing to add employers after that, that May 11th. Finally, we have here some resources that I mentioned. The Commuter Benefits Work for Us website, the APTA white paper that I mentioned, which can be found in the report. And here's what it looks like here. It looks at the basics, talks about the impact the transit benefit has on ridership, discusses ridership loss, revenue reduction, congestion increases, things of that nature. That can be found here in the handouts. In addition, I have here the code to a widget. I can't pull it back up right now, but you noted that on the commuter benefits work for us website here, there was a, actually maybe I can, this widget here that takes you to the Take for Action. The code for that widget is here. And if that doesn't work, let me know, and I will find somebody smarter than I and all these things to get it to you. But I believe that's the code. And also, I put the contact information for some of the key members of the coalition. Myself, David Judd, Jody Dito with WageWorks, John Enterprise with, John Martz with Enterprise. With that, I'd like to turn over to David Judd for a few minutes. Before I do that, let me ask this. If you have with 130 plus people on the phone, I think it's going to be impossible to actually do a Q&A vocally. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat, and that's in the bottom right-hand corner. And then as David is sort of giving some closing remarks, that'll give you a moment or two to ask any questions that you may have, and then I can answer some of those questions. So David, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jason. As all of you have heard, this really is an important issue that affects a very, a very broad range of commuters. We're very concerned about, as Jason mentioned, about losing everything that we have gained. And by that I mean employers and their employees. Both of these are the beneficiary of the commuter tax benefit. We do appreciate all of you joining the call, and before we get off and get to the questions, I do want to let you know that our meetings on Capitol Hill that we've had in the past couple of weeks have been very productive. We've clearly opened eyes to many members of Congress that might not have thought that their constituents or companies in their districts actually take advantage of the commuter benefit. Many of these meetings have been with the 24 members of the Ways and Means Committee that Jason showed earlier, and we really did open a lot of eyes. So before we conclude, I do want to reiterate our request to you to help us help your clients, employees, commuters by doing the two things that Jason's outlined. First is helping employers sign our support letter. It's really important for employers to weigh in on this issue, hopefully by next week. If there's government affairs staff that needs more information, whether they're at a headquarters office or they're in Washington, please reach out to Jason or have them reach out to Jason. Large employers with regional and national footprints are really essential to this. They mean a lot to those congressional offices. On the grassroots side is contact your members of Congress. You saw the link that Jason had, also Commuter Benefits Work for Us, which is the coalition website, and that's made up of transit agencies, van pool operators, advocacy groups, transit benefit providers, just a wide coalition that believes in the commuter benefit. But this is where grassroots can be very, very effective. The more members of Congress that hear from their constituents means more ears and eyes up on Capitol Hill understanding the impact of the commuter benefit. We will follow with some regular updates. We do appreciate you joining us and certainly appreciate all of your help. Contact Jason or me with any questions, and I'm going to turn it back to Jason for questions.
Yep. And Casey, I think you're seeing the questions, but I'm not. So if you just want to ask them, I'll go ahead and do my best to answer them.
Yes, sir. The first one is, and I think the answer is no, but I didn't know if there's any loopholes to this. Can I send the online letter more than once?
No, no, unless you use different computers and different email addresses.
Okay. And then someone asked, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What about asking for workplace charging incentives? There are many cost-effective ways to offer and encourage electric vehicles for commuting.
There is legislation that has been introduced by Senator Brown of Ohio, I believe, that looks at just that. I I will be very plain in saying that I think, well, ACT hasn't taken a position on that particular piece of legislation, something that the Public Policy Council will certainly look at. I think the primary effort is to maintain 132F, and if we can guarantee that, any efforts to modernize, adjust it, tweak it to include other modes or other functions is something that we're interested in exploring. And I don't want to pretend like we're not having those conversations, because we are. But, you know, if there is no 132F, then there is no possibility to change 132F. And if I'm not clear, 132F is the section of tax law that the benefit's referencing. So I think, you know, the short answer is agree, and we're not ignoring that, but I guess we need to be a little more comfortable with our place in the world before we start to sort of talk about adding things to it. And there are organizations within the coalition that have even stronger feelings towards that, related to, you know, we can't be asking for more when we're trying to defend what we have. I think ACT is a little bit more open in terms of recognizing that once we solidify our place, we can look to, you know, some of these other things that you had mentioned, electric vehicles, etc. So hopefully that answers your question, but I am aware of Senator Brown's legislation. I do not believe there's a companion in the House, but I've certainly been in contact with his office about it.
Okay. I believe the next question was regarding when all the signatures and everything need to be in by, but someone asked, what's May 11th?
What is May 11th?
Yeah.
To be blunt, an arbitrary date that I picked. You know, as I mentioned, you know, 10 days ago, the discussions that were taking place in Congress were that the powers that be, those 24 Republicans that I mentioned, were going to be getting together in early May to finalize what would be included in a tax reform package and what wouldn't. I think that timeline has slipped a little bit. No one's really sure, including, I think, the people in charge. So we sort of picked an arbitrary date. There's nothing, you know, there is no hard reason for the 11th. That's why I sort of referenced it being a bit of a soft deadline. At the same time, you know, I don't want to sit and say May 30th, because I think it'll lose a sense of urgency. And let me make no mistake about it. Many of you on this call and others have known me for a long time. I am not one to say the sky is falling. And I'm not necessarily sure that the sky is falling. We're preventing it from falling. But I did notice a couple cracks in the sky. So I hope you take the urgency in my voice, in my history of not overreacting, to understand that this is something that we absolutely need to be paying attention to, and that my pleas are hopefully not falling on deaf ears. So May 11th is just an arbitrary date. If it takes more time to get more employers, awesome. But at the same time, this is somewhat urgent and time sensitive.
Okay, questions are coming in. If a TMA employer is also an ACT member, should we assume that ACT is already reaching out to them, or should we still make the request?
Oh, definitely make the request. I will be blunt in my assessment and ability. There are, you know, ACT has a staff of 3.5, and our ability to be everywhere is limited. For those of you who are not ACT members, join and sponsor, and we can change all of that. But you know, there is very, very targeted discussions going on, and again, because it's a very small group of people trying to do a lot of work, certainly do not wait for me. My hope is that through this webinar, through the legislative alerts, many of you will be inspired to begin the discussions with your employers, and so that, when I do reach out to you, or if I do reach out to you, those discussions will have already begun to take place. I mean, there are 24 members of Congress. That's a lot of turf to cover. But certainly don't wait for me. Please proactive, get out there, and then sort of force me to react to you. But that's that would be my ask.
Okay, thank you. Next one, if I agree they are unlikely to do away with the parking benefit. Should we tie the transit benefit closer to the parking benefit so we ride those coattails?
We are in appropriate meetings, and the letters that we have also discuss that very issue. I mean, what I don't want to do is make this just about parking, because I don't want Congress to realize, hey, we got a parking problem, we got to figure out how to fix the parking benefit. So I think the short answer is yes, but we've got to be tactful. Tactical, in terms of how we use it. So it's a point that I'm making in the meetings that I had last week. It was a point that I always brought up, but it was a point that I only made once or twice, and then I let it go. I did not want it to become the focus of the discussion or the meeting. But absolutely, especially if you are in an area where transit benefit usage is not as high as some of the other places around the country, I would certainly go to your employer that you may work with that may not offer the transit benefit at all and say, listen, while you don't offer a transit benefit, and by the way, I'd like to discuss that with you, but this will impact, you from a parking sense, so please sign on to that letter. Said a different way, companies don't need to offer the transit benefit to get on this letter. But I think that's a case-by-case example, and if you want more assistance in helping to craft that message, you can go ahead and email me directly.
Okay.
My email's
worst case, if we do lose the benefit or some of it, when would you expect it to take effect?
That's a good question. I would imagine Congress would begin at the next taxable year. So if Congress were to finish a tax reform package in 2017, it would probably begin for tax year 2018. I think there's too many logistical issues if they were to retroactively revamp the tax code. So I would imagine it would be for 2018, and if tax reform didn't happen until 2018, I imagine it would be 2019. That being said, I recognize, and this may sound a little ridiculous, but I recognize there's a lot of people whose jobs, whose efforts rely on this benefit as being a cornerstone of what they do. I'm not going to let this go away without a hell of a fight. So I almost don't want to even think about that, but since you asked, logistically speaking, would probably be the next taxable year, which would be, in this case, 2018.
Okay. The next question is, are you planning on sharing what companies are signing on so that fellow companies see who their partners in this are?
That's a good question. Get back to me on that. I would say this: anyone who, so the challenge is the way to communicate that. What I will likely do, and I got to talk with other coalition members, and quite frankly, we need to clear this with those who sign on to the letter. What I will likely do is, if we have enough companies on, say, May 11th, and everyone agrees to it, and I'm spitballing here, so please do not hold me to this, it is possible that I will send out the letter as it stands so that folks can see who else is on the letter. And that may incite other companies to want to join the letter. I know business is often a monkey see, monkey do mentality. So I think there's a fairly good chance that I will find an avenue to show the letter at a certain point in time without it being a final letter. But again, I need to talk with everyone else involved in this process, as well as I think the companies that would have signed on by then.
Okay. Are you aware of international examples of parking, employer-provided parking? I believe Australia and Austria are two examples.
Not specifically in terms of policy and taxing policy, but I'm making a note to check those out. Again, in an ideal world, we could tax parking from a transportation aspect. There's nothing better than pricing out single occupancy vehicles or not incentivizing them. That being said, I still do not see the foresight in this Congress to share that opinion. Perhaps in another Congress, but I do not see this Congress ever getting behind a scenario that would tax or price parking in any sort of detrimental way. But I will certainly look at Australia. If anyone wants to send me there to see it firsthand, I'd be more than happy to take that.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Are cities, mayors organizing around this because of potential effect on transit?
We've had them on letters before, and it's something we may look at doing again. But for right now, I think the best thing that local governments can do is to reach out to their local chambers, their employer organizations, or help them spread the word. So I think the short answer is right now we are not organizing a municipal-based letter. That's for quite frankly strategic reasons. It's not that we don't want them on, but with the limited time and resources that we have, the strongest voice that we can have is that of in this Congress is that of the private sector, the employer. So I think that the message back to any municipal government who wants to be helpful is to the extent practical, forward and help us organize and help us get both employers and folks onto this grassroots letter. That may be something as spring turns this summer that we do look to do some sort of municipal letter. That's a decision not made by me alone, but by others. I can tell you from an ACT perspective, we have very much looked to organize local governments who are supportive of TDM activities and looking to create a working group of those local governments. And it's something that we hope to have more information on later this summer. But in terms of this campaign directly, I think for right now, we're going to focus on the employer community, and then we'll reassess later this spring or summer.
Okay. There's a few more here. Will you speak for a bit about the Senate strategy? Is there a consensus there that tax reform will move through reconciliation? If so, and Democrats vote aren't necessary, Schumer isn't as critical to the bill's passage, who will be the qualified transportation fringe benefit champion?
So without getting to too much details for everyone else in the call, I will simply say that one of the ways that they're looking to avoid needing to get 60 votes, which would require in many ways bipartisan agreement, is to use something called budget reconciliation, which allows the Senate to pass legislation without 60 votes. They only need 50. The challenge is that all costs associated with anything passed in budget reconciliation must be within the budget cycle. I keep on hearing over and over again that no matter how they cut it, tax reform any type of major tax reform would have costs outside of the 10-year window, and would have impacts on outside of the 10-year window. So it may be incredibly difficult for the Senate and Congress in general to pass tax reforms through reconciliation. As far as a Senate strategy, if they do not use reconciliation, Republicans will have to keep all 52 or 50 other 52 Republicans on board. What Republican will be our voice? We don't have one yet. I think for right now, or at least identified one. I think for right now, we're really focusing on the House because that's where the action is. To be very blunt, the Senate has been very, very wait and see. Even they're having very, very basic discussions over there. So I think there's a wait and see approach in the Senate. Senator Hatch, who's the chairman of the committee, came out yesterday and said that he really thinks tax reform needs to be done bipartisan. That very well could be rhetoric. It could very well be that he's just saying that to, knowing full well that it won't be. But we'll certainly be moving on. When it gets to the Senate, we will be looking to identify a Republican. There's a number of Republicans who I think can be helpful. But moreover, I think really where we'll be able to benefit is the idea of they're going to lose 2 Republicans. I have a hard time seeing all 52 Republicans staying in line for something as massive as tax reform. At the same time, I think there will be some Democrats who may be brought in to work in a comprehensive fashion. So I could see a situation where, at least in the Senate, it's not true bipartisan, but it's sort of the Gang of 8 or some sort of gang mentality where there's 10 or 15 Democrats working with Republicans. There are a couple of those Democrats that usually do that are identified as huge supporters of the transit benefit. Mark Warner is an example. But in terms of a Senate strategy, we don't have as specific a targeted strategy as we do in the House. That's largely, right now at least, a factor of where the action is, but it's in the back of our minds.
Okay, we have a few more questions, but we'll just end probably with this last one, and then if anyone's question wasn't read, you can email Jason directly. Jason, why is a tax expenditure approach to supporting commuters better than a expenditure through the annual appropriations process?
Okay, hold on. Can you ask that again?
Sure. Why is a tax expenditure approach to supporting commuters better than an expenditure through the annual appropriations process?
Well, they're two very different processes. I mean, the appropriation, right now the only federal money that goes towards supporting transit in many ways is for the construction and purchase of transit capital, which ACT is very supportive of. The tax expenditures aren't expenditures in the nature of cash being used. It's really money not being collected in the form of taxes. So, it's two very, very separate policy pieces, and I'll go so far to sort of add that the transit benefit is truly the only way, one of the only ways that the federal government actually attempts to modify commuting behavior in any way, shape, or form. Everything else is a very, very capital-based expenditure. Again, ACT is very supportive of that. but it's very different than any tax expenditure. If you have if you'd like to have a further discussion about that, I'm not entirely sure I understand your question clearly. Please email me and perhaps I can explain it better.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And again, there were some other questions, but if you can email Jason directly those questions, I think we try to wrap this up here within an hour.
Perfect. Anything else?
I think that's it. If anyone wanted those handouts, they are on the lower right-hand side down there where it says handouts. There are 5 if anyone needs it. Otherwise, I think that's it, Jason, unless you have anything else.
That's it from my end.
Okay, thank you all for joining us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, and help. Thank you.
Thanks.